The Iron Duke by L. Ron Hubbard, Part 2.
'Twas a dreary day when I first met the man called Blackie Lee.
You'll think it was a drearier day than that if you don't stop talking about it, my pet.
Don't call me pet!
Stubb yowled. Blackie smiled and lay back into the pillows, opening a book. Stubb looked at him with remorse.
And don't look at me that way either. For 3 weeks, you've been walking around this place like a sick pup. I haven't mentioned it before, but if you had been on your toes that night and had followed me into the palace, instead of standing outside waiting to see what would happen, we wouldn't be here.
How was I supposed to know you wanted me?
Sit down or fall down. But if you don't stop pacing back and forth, the Eldorian government will be sending you a bill for wearing out the floor of this cell.
3 weeks of this is enough to make anybody wear out the floors. It ain't the situation, it's the suspense. Why did they bother getting all those doctors in to look after you? Why didn't they just stand us up against the wall and let us have it? Are we gonna spend the rest of our lives in here? Not even a trial? Why, there's been nobody to see us even. For all the attention that's given us now, you might as well be dead.
You think you've got things to worry you?
I suppose you've got more.
Yeah. I've got a little matter of 12 million francs waiting for us in Paris.
What?
You heard me. 12 million francs.
But how? Who from? Why?
The Sons of Freedom guarantee to divvy up that much if the Archduke Philip declares an election and is thereby forced to abdicate.
But you can't work that.
Who knows?
Stubb went roaming around the cell for a long time, curiosity sizzling within him. Finally, he could not bear silence any longer.
You mean you've got an idea?
I mean, I've got an idea. Why else would I write to Grouch?
I didn't know you did that.
Lots of things you don't know.
You wrote to Grouch. What did you say?
Whatever I said, if I said it right, he should be here to see us in an hour or two. From the information I pried out of the sentry.
Was that why you were talking to him?
Stop interrupting if you want information. You know as well as I do that there have been at least 5 riots around and about Warren. The Sons of Freedom had reason to believe an election would be soon announced, so they noised it. And when it wasn't announced, the riots began. Belchert is stirring up this country as if it were a bee's nest. He's going to have an election and get the communists in power if he has to blow up the whole of Aldoria.
Well, what's that got to do with you and 12 million francs?
If I am responsible for the election, why, then we collect.
You sometimes make me think I'm hearing things. How could you order the election?
There were footsteps in the corridor and the snap of rifle slings as the sentries at the turns came to attention. A face appeared in the grate and a key rattled in the lock, and then Grouch, carefully backed by 2 armed officers, entered the cell. Grouch stood looking at Blackie. Grouch's evil little face was speculating.
You wrote me a letter?
I did.
And may I ask what it is to you if the Archduke Philip stays on the throne?
Maybe it's because we look alike, and his death would be like losing half of myself.
And maybe not. You are well again?
Well as ever.
Grouch looked around the cell, his eyes coming to rest on a pile of books upon the table.
Where did you get those?
I thought you had them sent.
Me? How would I know if you could read? Ah, Shelley. Shelley, how is it that the Countess Zeta can bribe herself past my guards?
Zeta?
Shelley is her favorite poet. I make it my business to know all things about my enemies. How did she send them to you, the person I ordered held, without communication?
Why, they just came in, that's all. Every couple of days, the guard would hand through a package and it would be a book. No note, nothing. See here, Grotch, is this a plot of some sort? Are you sure the Countess Zeta sent these books?
As if you don't know.
The chickens!
What chickens? So she sent you food as well? She sends you food and books to a person in my prison that I have ordered held without communication.
You mean you didn't send the chickens and the wine and so on?
Why should I send a cheap adventurer like you chickens and Shelley and wine?
That was why I wrote to you. When all those docs came and fixed me up and looked after me and books and food were sent, I thought you had something in mind, a reason to keep me alive and happy.
Doctors, the only surgeon you've had is the prison surgeon.
Well, put it that way.
So she sent you physicians into my prison to my prisoner. Oh, wait until I see her again. But that isn't the business at hand. You said you could help me quell the disorders that have broken out. I have no knowledge of your ideas on the subject. I don't want any knowledge of them. I have my own plans. When your letter came, I suddenly conceived a way to avert disaster.
With me included?
But you included. It has occurred to me that if the Archduke were only brave enough and willing to make a public appearance, the populace might again have some faith in him. The stories of his drunkenness have gained too wide a circulation, and the people are howling for an election. That election must not take place. If the Archduke Philip could make a strong public appeal in person, we might again quiet Eldoria.
And?
But the Sons of Freedom have threatened his life if he does not immediately abdicate. A public appearance would be a highly dangerous undertaking, and so we cannot trust Philip to carry it out. I have ordered the dedication of a new bridge, and I have proclaimed that Philip would be there in person. You, my spice-buckling bravo, will be there instead of Philip.
Highly dangerous?
Highly.
And what do I get out of this?
You will serve my purposes for a month or two. At the end of that time, you may have your liberty.
And nothing more?
And nothing more. Refuse this, and you'll never be heard of again.
Hard terms.
I'm a hard man.
But I'll take them.
You are wise. Tomorrow morning, you will be taken to the royal wardrobe and dressed. Tomorrow noon, you will dedicate the new bridge.
What if I'm assassinated?
We will pretend you are merely wounded. And Philip, day after tomorrow, will appear for a moment on a balcony to reassure the people. I have thought of everything.
There is no doubt of that.
Grotch about-faced and went limping out into the corridor. The cell door clanged behind him.
So it was Zeta. And I thought we were merely being fattened for future use by Grotch. Sometimes, Stub, I think I'm a fool.
Sometimes. I know it.
The master of the wardrobe had done marvels. And so it was at 10:30 that Blackie Lee paced up and down the top of the palace steps and waited for his carriage. Stubb wished he could ask him what was wrong, but he did not dare. Blackie was too grand. But after a while, Stubb noticed that Blackie kept looking for someone, for his eyes roamed ever to the main gates, and each whir of wheels brought a slackening in his walk. Zita? Stubb asked himself. No, it could not be Zita. Certainly not Zita. Certainly Blackie Lee had more sense, too, than to cast eyes at a countess who would inevitably have to marry someone of her station. The carriage came at last, brilliant with colors and heraldry. Grotch came with it, but when it reached the steps, Grotch creakingly got out, much too smart to be so close to a possible target.
May I remind you that while you may be wearing the uniform of Philip of Aldoria, all brave with medals, you are in reality Blackie Lee, vaunted by nearly every government in Europe.
But Blackie had not seemed to have heard him, for he was again looking toward the gate. He faced Grotch.
Listen, you old buzzard. Where's Countess Zita?
Ah, so he also has romantic ideas. My fine Bravo, the Countess Zita incurred my displeasure. But I am afraid that a man would have to be more powerful than myself, either to harm or commend her. You had better forget the Countess Zita, for many a man far more worthy than yourself has sighed in her direction, quite in vain. Get into that carriage. I shall be waiting for news.
Blackie took another turn up and down the top step, and then, giving it up, went down to the carriage and got in. 2 blocks farther along, he caught a glimpse of a face in the crowd, a sharp, violent sort of face, pale and merciless. Balchard. He had promised to announce the election within a week, but that had been 3 weeks ago. Blackie felt about on the seat for the long-muzzled cavalry revolver, and even when he found it, felt no assurance. A cold premonition forced upon him by Balchard's bitter eyes. But by the time the procession had stopped in the small park on the near side of the new bridge, and Blackie had walked up to the platform that had been built, he was over his momentary shakes, and his hands were quite calm as he severed the bright ribbons to officially open the right-of-way. Most of the crowd that had clogged the streets had trailed along and stood now in much the same silence upon the lawn of the park, a moving blanket of faces without a smile anywhere, much less a cheer. Blackie faced them. He was unaware of the speech which an official was trying to get him to hold. He was still watching for someone and still failing to find her. In a mechanical, disinterested voice, he began to read the pompous nothingness in the lines. A shrill voice in the mob cried,
"Devil take the bridge! We came here to know about the election!"
Blackie halted and looked down across the thousands.
Yeah, what about the elections?
Balchard's Sons of Freedom were staging this, Blackie knew.
He is afraid to hold the elections. He knows the will of the people.
Meanwhile, police and hussars were trying to spot the hecklers, but with no success. The word caught on as it was meant to. 6 shouted,
The elections!
We demand to know! Tell us about the elections!
Blackie sighed. He gave one last hopeless look around, and then he tore the written speech into 4 sections and hurled the fragments fluttering from him.
I'll tell you about the elections.
If you dare!
I dare. I dare more than that. I proclaim here and now officially that the elections will take place upon the last Thursday of this month.
There was chaos behind him, chaos and cheers before him. Somehow, Captain Drett got him by the arm and dragged him away.
Why did you do it?
Blackie stretched out his legs and looked thoughtfully into the fireplace. This was the north turret, and though the quarters were large and, aside from drafts, comfortable, Blackie Lee was a prisoner. He was needed too much to be thrown into a cell again.
Why shouldn't I do it?
But you might as well have sent us all to Headman's Block and had done with it. If they had revolted, our troops are loyal enough and good enough to handle them, and we would have crushed these upstarts under Belchard. But we cannot draw back from this election. What folly! What a mockery! Belchard has been praying for this to happen, and now that it has happened, he is in his glory.
No use for a lot of the innocent people to get killed. Even if you had crushed the revolt, you'd still have to watch the whole nation.
That is not your reason. You're deep. I'll give you that. You play life as though it were a game of cards. You have no scruples. Perhaps you are too big and too strong to believe in anything but your own laws. But this time you have played your hand too far. I do not know what is at the bottom of this, but it is dark and awful. Answer me, Blackie Lee. Why did you do it?
Perhaps because you were not there.
Hi. What could I have to do with it?
You sent me Shelley and food and wine and doctors. When I learned that, for I was too stupid to think of it, I thought for a little while that you might be interested in me, whatever I am. And then, well, you know, I might be going out there to get a bullet or a bomb, and you didn't appear. Well, that's that. You didn't appear, and I announced the election. Now I'm going through with it.
Yes, you are going through with it. Philip is drunk, and you must go out and make his speeches. Yes, you've gone out and made them, and made a mess of them.
Oh, I don't know. I always thought I was pretty good at making speeches.
You could be if you wanted to be.
I punctuated them rather nicely, and so far I've avoided getting killed, and that is a trick in itself. Here, I've been pouring out my very soul for your country in silver oratory, and you criticize me.
You mock me.
By the way, how old are you?
She stared at him, again frozen by surprise, and she surprised herself further by answering.
26.
Ever think of marriage?
Marriage? Bah! If I ever find a man that can get the better of me, I'll marry him.
Haven't met him yet, eh?
Certainly not.
Blackie poured himself a small glass of brandy and then, on impulse, gave it to her and poured himself another.
So, you don't know why I announced that election?
I certainly do not. And I came here to find out.
Well, I'll tell you. I made a bargain with Belchard some time ago, and he, thinking me Philip, is ready to keep it.
A bargain? With Belchard?
Certainly. I play my stakes as I see them. He offered me a Paris income of 12 million francs if I ordered an election and lost it. Philip won't know about that. I do. I'll claim it in Paris.
You expect Belchard to keep his bargain?
Why not? A year of his rule and the people would welcome back Philip.
But Belchard will never let us out of this country alive. He'll have all of us killed. And even now, the people are so excited about this election that no amount of threat can extract the tax receipts. And news of this election has wrecked our national credit. We cannot borrow or beg, and our troops are mainly mercenaries. Already nearly 1,000 of them have deserted, either because of promises from the Sons of Freedom or because of lack of pay. Probably both. We could have held a revolt. You sold out Aldoria for 12 million francs. You knew Philip would probably never know or claim it, and that he might be killed. You knew you could discount a rumor of his death. You sold us out. And now you make speeches and appearances just good enough to make sure we'll lose. You're gambling with our very lives, with the nation.
Why not?
And now you can say, why not?
I told you why I did it.
And why was that? Beyond an unholy thirst for gain.
Because you didn't come to make sure I came through that parade alive.
I suppose that there is no use arguing with you. You will carry this thing through and make certain of our loss.
Sit down.
Sir?
He reached out and took her wrist and gave it a slight twist so that she had to sink into her chair. No man had ever before dared lay hand upon her, and the experience could not seem to register. So impossible it seemed.
You say there is no way to make me change. I admit the thing has gone so far that almost nothing could stop it or keep Balchard out of the palace. But there is yet another bargain I might make.
And that?
Well, if you would consent to be my wife, I might be able to win this election for the crown.
You devil!
You asked if there was a way.
You would double-cross Belchard.
He made no bargain with me, but with the man he thought was Philip.
She sat for minutes without moving or speaking. He gave her time, gazing steadily into the fire. At last she got up and paced up and down the hearth, twisting at the silken kerchief in her hand.
If I consent to this, you will take my word?
Certainly.
Very well. If you can swing this election to the crown, I will take you as my husband.
Done. A drink on it?
I do not drink what's fine.
And very straight, she marched from the room. The group before the speaker's platform in the little town of Dolan were sullen and apathetic, as usual, and the hecklers, also as usual, were many. Stubb, sitting at the side of the platform, was in a state of dull amazement, as he had been for 60 hours. He knew that Blackie Lee could talk. He had seen Blackie take many an angry crowd and send them away cheering for him. Why, some of these yokels were really falling for it now. The dull apathy began to melt from them, and now and then a head nodded in agreement with something Blackie said. In the last 3 towns, Blackie Lee had left in a carriage full of flowers, with the populace straining its lungs in the shout.
Long live Philip!
It was wrong, all wrong. Stubb had faith in one heckler. The fellow was a big bruiser, evidently the town bully, and he was coming through every few words with the Aldorian equivalent of,
Oh, yeah?
and the hussars, though they wanted to kick the fellow's teeth in, were restrained because Blackie had ensnared them into obeying his orders and had ordered
No violence.
a strange order from any archduke or anyone impersonating an archduke. The bruiser, on whom Stubb pinned his hopes, was getting louder and funnier, interrupting Blackie at nearly every word, and Blackie was suddenly but politely annoyed.
You don't like what I say?
Addressed, the bully lost some of his cockiness, but he had the courage to roar.
No, I don't like it.
Blackie thereupon did something very strange. He took off his blue uniform coat and, along with his sword, laid it upon the speaker's table. He came down the steps, rolling up his sleeves.
You still don't like it?
Who's going to make me?
Blackie answered, but not with words. The bully picked himself off the grass about 10 feet away and, berserk with pain, charged in. He lit 12 feet away, got up and charged in again. He lit 15 away and stayed down. Blackie went back to the platform, put on his coat, and started to go on with his speech. But there were too many cheers. A little later, rolling along the hot white road between lines of red-jacketed hussars, Stubb complained as he poured Blackie a drink.
That's going to make you popular back there. What the hell were you trying to do? Win this election?
Think there's any chance?
I hope not. I thought it was worth 12 million francs to us to lose this election.
That's what you thought.
And Stubb had to be content with that. His spirits were very low every time he thought about that bully boy back there. The town, when Blackie was through, had almost carried him to the carriage, and it seemed he'd had to shake 1,000 hands. And the Sons of Freedom man had stalked off in a thunderstorm of wrath, alone. What the devil was it all about, wondered Stubb. But soon they were in the next town, and the people were all out on the green, and the Sons of Freedom man made his case for communism and got cheered until everyone was hoarse. And then Blackie got up and began his speech. There was a big bruiser right in front who kept yelling the Eldorian equivalent of...
Oh, yeah?
A big bruiser, evidently the town bully. Stubb gulped and stared. The same man. And in a moment, the same fight, riding off again to howls of...
Long live Philip!
Who the hell is that guy?
Oh, him? That's the ape from Eldoria. He's been to America, and he knows all about taking a fall.
But good Lord, such tricks will win this election.
Well...
Blackie drawled. Stubb sputtered helplessly and fell silent.
I don't care what you've done in the country. I still say they'll never carry Warren. Bouchard's machine will pack the boxes and resort to every vile trick he's ever heard about. He has advice straight from Moscow, and those Russians are experts. A country town is different. You couldn't do anything dishonest without everyone knowing it. But here in Warren, Bouchard's party will win, and Warren has enough votes to carry the election.
Go away. It's bad enough to have to talk all day without talking all night to you.
But tomorrow is the day. At 9, the polls open, and we know for certain that we will never carry Warren. By every other man is a member of the Sons of Freedom here.
Blackie bleakly filled a tumbler with water and drank to ease his sandpapered throat.
Who is the administrative genius here? You or I?
What's this going to be? You are getting a trifle too gay with all this newfound glory, my fine Bravo.
I asked a simple question. What's it worth to better your chances in Vorin?
What's it worth? You mean you'd bargain?
Censure from you is very funny, but I happen to be too tired to laugh. What's it worth?
10,000 Zetestas.
20,000. Cash on this table.
After a little, Grotch came back with 20,000 Zetestas and laid them on the table. Blackie counted them and thrust the roll into his jacket pocket.
It is now 7 o'clock. In other words, you have a whole night ahead. Go shake Philip out of his stupor and get him to sign a proclamation. Or I'll sign it, since they're one and the same.
About what?
For years, ever since Turkey started it, women in these small states have been shouting for complete suffrage. Granted.
What?
Give women the right to vote. Issue the proclamation tonight. It is valid because your government is still valid. They'll be so wild with joy and so grateful that they'll vote for Philip.
My work. But that will only balance the vote. It won't guarantee a win. For I know those boxes will be stuffed. We couldn't keep Sons of Freedom from the ballot board.
Run along and write things on a fancy piece of parchment. Personally, I am going to get me a good night's sleep.
It would have been very unlike Blackie to have told anything resembling the truth. As soon as Grotch had left, Blackie sent an orderly loping out to find Stubb. Stubb came.
Sweetheart, has that package from Bucharest arrived?
Day before yesterday. And don't call me sweetheart.
Then go get it and put on your hat and coat. We're going places.
Hey, I thought they wouldn't let you out of their sight.
Drat will go along with us and maybe a half a dozen troopers, the usual quiet, private party all by ourselves.
Say, Blackie,
Yes?
are you sure you feel all right? No fever or anything?
Why?
I don't know. But I wish to Pete you'd make up your mind whether you want to win or lose. One minute I've got visions of myself riding around in limousines, and next I can hear myself saying, "Mister, give me a dime for a cup of coffee." If I've got it right, if we lose, we make 12 million francs. If we win, we get put over the border into the arms of our old execution-minded pals.
Stop worrying your head about such petty details and get that package.
Okay. Okay.
The Countess Zita sat in lonely splendor in her lavish Vorin apartments. Since dawn, her bags had been packed and fast horses had been standing in harness against the possible need of flight. But as the hours dragged and tidings came, the necessity for escape grew more and more remote. For the election, despite all the brawling and bellowing of the Sons of Freedom, was a landslide for the crown. Upon the ballots, very few crosses appeared after "by popular vote," which was to say, communism. The ballots were black and heavy, with the X's following continued monarchy. Continued monarchy. The North wanted it. The East and the West wanted it. And Vorin most of all, had abruptly turned angry backs upon the Sons of Freedom and the dictates of Balchard, and had scratched and fought to get into the polls, men and frenzied women alike, to maintain Philip's reign. At first, the royal party had been too stunned to take stock. But when noon and then 1 o'clock had come, with the votes still coming in everywhere in the ratio of 1 to 100 against communism, the members of the royal party were encouraged enough to stroll in the streets to discover what was going on. The Countess Zita alone had not been overjoyed. She had, at 2 o'clock, drifted briefly through the town in her carriage and had seen with her own eyes the words that had electrified the populace.
To all those who believe Philip has not the good of Aldoria at heart.
Below this was a copy of an agreement signed by Balchard himself to the effect that Philip was to receive 12 million francs from the Aldorian public treasury if he would abdicate, and there was a promissory note to confirm the bargain. But worst blow of all to Balchard, that note bore the added line, "faithfully guaranteed by the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin." In vain had the Sons of Freedom attempted to prove that last signature a forgery. The government had hastily shown about documents that confirmed the authenticity of the signature, or at least seemed to confirm it. The Countess Zita went back to her apartment and shut herself off from the mad town. At 9:30, the tabulating was nearly finished, and it began to dawn upon her that if Blackie Lee was coming for her, he would shortly be here. When the outer bell rang, Zita stood up. Her face was bitter and cold, but as a woman of honor, she was prepared to keep her word and make arrangements for the wedding. She heard a servant answer the bell. She heard Major Falloy's footsteps coming to her door to announce him. But Falloy didn't announce Blackie Lee. He announced Stubb Doyle. Stubb held his hat nervously in one hand and a letter in the other. Stubb was red-faced and embarrassed.
He, sent me over with this, m'lady.
She felt anger kindle in her. He was impertinent enough to demand that she come to him. She snatched the letter.
The Countess Zita. My lady, the election has been won. You have, you suppose, lost. But allow me to correct that impression. Years ago, I found that I resembled our friend Philip and planned to cash in upon that resemblance in Paris. In that, I failed. Some time ago, I found myself hard-pressed by the Nazi government and had to choose between starvation in Austria or a moment of plenty in Aldoria. I chose the latter. I was about to take my leave when you met me on that garden path and proceeded to deliver a verbal lashing. Shortly after, Balchard mistook me for Philip and made a bargain with me, for he had long awaited that chance. I signed, naturally, to save my skin. You delivered me to the palace, and I had to try and brazen it out. You sent me food and wine and books as though I was some stray tramp. I assume by now that you are convinced that you will have to go through with an onerous bargain. Not so, my lady. It would have been quite impossible to have collected that sum from Belchard, election or no election. It was quite impossible to win this election. But it is won. I'm afraid, my lady, that all men are blurs to you. I hope that you find some fellow who will give you even a worse drubbing than I have. If you ever marry, my dear lady, I hope your husband ignores you. By the time you receive this, I shall be en route elsewhere. I leave in your hands my little friend, Stubb Doyle, for I fear that my further company will complete his ruin. Your bridegroom not to be, Blackie Lee. P.S. I hope he tells you that all your hats look badly upon you.
Blackie Lee, curled up in the corner of a compartment and sleeping the sleep of the innocent and just, possessed of the suit of clothes on his back and enough money to get into a good stud game. The trainmaster was shaking him.
Sire, we are almost to Vorin.
Blackie knew he was dreaming now. He had left Vorin at least 6 hours ago, and the next stop ought to be the frontier.
Vorin?
Vorin, sire, we are just coming into the station now.
Am I crazy? Or is it both of us?
We were stopped, sire, and ordered to return to Vorin.
Blackie could hear voices and then was nearly blinded by the lights of the station. Or were those station lights? What? Torches? Why, the place was mobbed and the people were screaming. What the devil had gone wrong? How had word gotten out that he wasn't really Philip? Oh well, he'd faced many an angry mob before. Perhaps. Blackie stared down at the upraised faces, all red with yelling, lighted by the torches. And there were banners, banners, banners.
Long live the Iron Duke!
A band began to play in a wild effort to drown out the shouting, and the people began shouting in a mad effort to drown out the band.
Long live the Iron Duke!
Blackie wonderingly waved a hand at the crowd, supposing that the right thing to do, and it promptly went delirious. There was Major Falloy, ready to hand him down. People surged and pushed and pawed and tried to touch him.
Long live the Iron Duke!
Somehow they got through that tumultuous sea. Somehow Major Falloy got him into a carriage. But the mob came right along with it, and so did the band and the banners and the torches.
Long live the Iron Duke!
How do you like it?
I like it all right, but what's it all about?
Why, it just happened that Philip himself got a hold of some of those photostatic copies you had posted around.
What's that got to do with it?
He was so angry at having missed such a bargain that he nearly killed himself.
And so?
And so he told me, a person of influence, that if he received 100,000 francs a year, he'd be glad to leave the country. And he signed an order of abdication in favor of one Duke Lee, his cousin who looks so much like him.
He signed, say, look here, that doesn't explain all this reception. What
The
is...
whole truth was released by that, person of influence. When one is put to it, a great deal can be done in a very short time. And when they discovered that it was you, not Philip, who had whipped country bullies and made sly bargains with Belchard and given women complete suffrage, why, they wouldn't have let you leave the country in any event. You're a national hero. And it seems the new ruler of Eldoria.
He was dizzy with the shouting that was going up in the streets, dazed by her perfume, stunned by his sudden rise. For once in his life was a little too much for Blackie Lee.
And my hat, you like it?
It's terrible.
She looked taken aback, and then she laughed, her eyes sparkling with delight. And poor Stubb, in the vestibule of the church the following week, could only look down the aisle and shake his woefully bothered head.
I thought that guy was crazy.